Okay, in big breaking news just coming in, Rafael Nadal has withdrawn from the 2022 Wimbledon Championship. We all remember that epic quarterfinal match that he had against Taylor Fritz, a match that went a full distance of 5 sets. That final decider was decided in a tiebreaker. At the time, it was known that he had an injury. Nadal had an injury. He took a medical timeout in the second set. He was clearly in a lot of discomfort. Initially, it was thought that maybe that injury was a foot injury, because remember he was coming off a injury. Operation that he had gone, or an injury treatment that he had undergone, and post which there were doubts over whether he will even participate in the Wimbledon Championship. He did, though he kept saying that how his injury pans out, he'll have to wait and watch. However, the injury timeout that he took in the quarterfinal again Taylor Fritz was to do with something which was I think it was near his stomach area is where the injury, because he came on with bandages from there, so he may have hurt his core area. That was the issue, that he seemed to be having a problem, and the chair umpire at the time had said that because of the nature of the injury, the medical timeout was allowed inside the dressing room and not on the court. However, he went on to finish the match, but if you saw that quarterfinal against Taylor Fritz, it was quite visible that he was in pain. A few things that just gave away in terms of the pain he must be going through was his serve. So he wasn't doing his natural serve, which means he wasn't serving really quickly. You could see the pace was off his serve in the quarterfinal. Also, the double-handed backhand that he relies on, he wasn't playing. So with looking at those two particular shots that he was not playing at his best, the serve as well as his backhand, you could make out that that injury had something to do with his core area. So he wasn't stretching enough. His forehand seemed to be that all-powerful weapon that he was using. At the end of that quarterfinal win, that quarterfinal he eventually won. If you saw the match, he eventually won based on his experience and not so much because of his explosive play, because he wasn't being able to produce that kind of winners with his backhand, as well as his serve wasn't the usual. So you could make out that he used his experience to win that game. Now, what's really interesting is that at the end of that quarterfinal, when he came for the presentation ceremony, the question was asked that whether he's looking forward to that semi-final against Nick Kyrgios, and he said, yes, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a competitive game because Nick is a very competitive player, but he said, if I play, and even then he had the doubts. So clearly he was going to go in for scans. What we heard this morning, that he was going through some scans and waiting for some x-ray reports. That would have actually told you the nature of the injury. Maybe the reports came in today, and after which it has been decided that Rafael Nadal will not continue. So that comes in as a big shock to all tennis fans, and not just Rafael Nadal fans, because I know everyone was building up to watching that final, which could have been an eventual final between Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal. Also, not to forget that Rafael Nadal was gunning for a career Grand Slam, which he hadn't achieved. The best or the closest he had come to achieving that calendar slam was in 2010, when he won 3 out of the 4. He won the US Open, Wimbledon, as well as the French Open. He couldn't win the Australian Open that time around. 2010 is when he came closest to winning the calendar slam. That hasn't happened for him. And what's really interesting is we call this era as the greatest era in tennis, because we are seeing the 3 greatest players of all time in Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, and Rafael Nadal. But guess what? None of them have been able to achieve that calendar slam. That is, win all the 4 slams in one calendar year. Of course, Novak Djokovic came very close. As I mentioned, Rafael Nadal came very close in 2010, but none of them have been able to achieve that. People thought that this could be Rafael Nadal's year, and if he had to do that, this would have been the toughest slam for him to win, because, as you know, grass really doesn't suit his game. But now, because of that injury, he has pulled out of the Wimbledon. Was scheduled to play, beg your pardon, Nick Kyrgios in the semi-final, and as I said, you were all building up to that final against Novak Djokovic. It actually, it also comes as a reminder to all the naysayers. I was reading a lot of reports where people seem to suggest that Rafael Nadal may have been faking his injury, that was some sort of gamesmanship that he was showing, because he was down against a much younger and a fitter opponent in Taylor Fritz, and maybe to break that momentum, he took that medical time timeout, and how is it that he came back after that medical timeout and started playing well. But if you watch that quarterfinal closely, you could clearly make out that he wasn't at his best after he took that injury timeout. It was all down to the experience that he was, able to win that game. He was playing points sensibly, trying to play that chip backhand, not that aggressive backhand that he plays. So all the tricks from his book he did pull out, and that experience is actually what helped him win against Taylor Fritz. But now, injury has forced him out of the Wimbledon. What does that hold for Rafael Nadal in the future? That would be interesting too, because what Nadal has been saying, even when he won the French Open, he said, I'll have to take each tournament at a time. I'm not going to say that this is the last time I'm playing a tournament, because I don't know the extent of my injury. And up until now, he was actually dealing with the foot injury. Now there's another injury, the core injury that he's got right now. Whether it has got to do with his rib or whether it's got to do with his stomach area, that we will find out in time to come. But it's serious enough for him to have pulled out of a Grand Slam in a calendar year where he was gunning to win the calendar slam. So you could just assume that it is very serious in nature, and sometimes decisions are taken that going forward as to how he would how that injury would impact going forward in his career. And sometimes just to look at one slam, you may jeopardize your career in the long run. And maybe keeping that in mind, this decision has been taken. If you take a look at what happened even during the quarterfinal, when he took that injury timeout, there were indications from his box, his father in particular, who wanted him to just stop playing and not carry on in that injured state. But Rafael Nadal, as people who follow tennis know, that giving up and Rafael Nadal aren't are two words that cannot be boxed together, because Rafael Nadal rarely ever gives up. I know I can see a couple of comments saying that he trained today, and so how are you reporting? Well, he did train today. Even we were keeping track of the news, but this news has just come. So clearly it is not just based on how he's feeling physically. Sometimes you do end up playing, like he played the quarterfinal, when you're taking a lot of painkillers, and that's just temporary relief. He also underwent a scan, as I mentioned. The scan reports, the comprehensive scan reports may have come down, based on which this decision may have been taken. So what we can confirm here right now is that he has pulled out of the Wimbledon despite winning the quarterfinal. So no mouth-watering contest that we were all looking forward to between Rafael Nadal and Nick Kyrgios, as well as what could have been the eventual final between Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal. If you're a tennis fan, you would be disappointed not getting to see Rafael Nadal and not getting to see these mouth-watering contests. But in the larger interest of the sport and in the larger interest of one of the greatest to have played the sport, probably this is the best decision to have been taken, just so that he can then prolong his career and be competitive going forward. So that means Nick Kyrgios, by the way, let's not forget about Nick Kyrgios. He hadn't even reached the semi-final of a Grand Slam before this, but now is going to get a walkover, and so he will make it to the final, and it's going to be a big day for Nick Kyrgios as well. And quite often Kyrgios himself has said that grass is his favorite surface, and now on grass he'll get to play the final. Whether it is Novak Djokovic or not, we'll have to wait and find out. But Nick Kyrgios then is now guaranteed a spot in the finals of Grand Slam. Unfortunate for Rafael Nadal. That's all that we have for you on this breaking news, and these are all the details that we have for you at the moment. As and when we get to know a bit more, then we'll keep updating you on Sports Today. So don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon, because that's when you know when we have some fresh updates for you. Thanks so much for tuning in.